The Pittsburgh Penguins were ready for a challenge when facing the New York Rangers, but they got some bad news about their goaltending situation. Hunter Hodies is here to talk about that and preview what should be a very exciting series next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And it's my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies. Hunter, big challenge coming up for the Penguins. Rangers, great rivalry, but the Penguins getting some bad news about their goaltending situation. Fill in our listeners as to what happened and how does this affect the Penguins' preparations for this series?
Yeah, so the Penguins have had injury problems all year. This is nothing really new. They just had another terrible one that happened at the worst time, with 2.5 weeks left in the regular season. And of course, it is a broken foot per multiple reports. He has not started skating yet. Tristan Jarry, of course, he's out for the first 2 games. He's now day-to-day, which is better than week-to-week, which is what Mike Sullivan said almost 3 weeks ago. But information is going to be very scarce this time of year. Teams don't want the other teams to know their intentions with players and stuff like that. But until Jarry gets back onto the ice, we're really not going to know too much. But all we know is right now he's out for the first couple of games. If he is going to come back in this series, it's probably going to be late, maybe game 4 the earliest, and then games 5 through 7 if the Penguins are able to play those games. I assume, at least a couple of them they'll be able to get to. But it's just a really brutal injury for Pittsburgh. It was just really honestly the one injury outside of a core injury that they could not have this time of year. And, Tristan was playing so well. He was this close to really trying to redeem himself after what happened against the Islanders last year. I think he's probably just is feeling gutted that he couldn't go out there and prove, everyone else wrong. You proved us all wrong during the regular season, but to really do it, when the stakes really matter, I think that's definitely, kicking him right now. So just a really brutal injury, and it's going to make the task for the Penguins that much tougher.
So Casey DeSmith takes over as goal. What can you tell our listeners about his style of play and what he brings to the table and maybe what he doesn't bring to the table?
Yeah, so he's not Tristan. You can't really replace what he does. He's a lot smaller of a goaltender. He doesn't take up as much of the net. But, he's still, his movement has gotten a lot better as the season has gone on. He's definitely done work with Andy Chiodo. He is vulnerable to shots that go up high just because, again, he's not that big and he'll tend to go down at times when, in all honesty, he should be staying at his normal position. So I'm definitely worried about that in this series if the Rangers start to try to pick on him, top cheese, either the left or the right side. But he has played better since March. I think he's at a little over a .920 save percentage, since April. I think that's even like .925, .930. So the good play has been there. It's all a matter of, can he really elevate his game? Not to the point of Shesterkin, because you're still probably going to lose that battle, even if he does play well. But can he do it enough where the Penguins can win games out of it? That's the biggest thing for me. I'm sure he's welcoming this challenge. And probably didn't think he was going to be in this situation just because Tristan was fully healthy this entire season. The injury happened against the Islanders just a couple of weeks ago. But no, we'll see. Crazier things have happened. I know it's very unlikely, but he still plays a very athletic style where he's honestly going around the crease. So his movement is interesting, is to say the least. I think that's the word for it. But it's also a lot different than how Tristan plays.
One thing the Penguins do have is leadership, and you've got the core of Sidney Crosby, Evgeni Malkin, Kris, Letang, guys who have won multiple Stanley Cups. They've been there, they've done that. What do these guys add, and what does the fact that they may not be Penguins that much longer add to this whole equation in this series?
I mean, I think it means that they're going to do everything they can to have one more last crack at it and win a championship together. Because you're right, Gil. I mean, there's no guarantee that all three of them are together for the rest of their careers. I mean, both Malkin and Letang are free agents right after this postseason run. I would assume that Malkin will be back. Letang, I'm kind of 50-50 on, just because there really hasn't been too much of an update on their contract talks. But with how much they've accomplished together, 3 championships, 4 berths in the Stanley Cup final, 5 Eastern Conference playoff berths, and the most wins among any playoff team in the salary cap era. They're going to want to try to go out together and right off into the sunset going into the summer. It may not happen. It's probably unlikely to happen, but they're still going to really try to play their best hockey, just because they've been together for 16 years at this point. I mean, every Penguin fan is flat out spoiled by what they've been able to accomplish together. They're the only 3 players from that 2009 Cup run that are still playing on the team. It's hard to believe that the most recent one, Kris left the team after the 2017 season. So it definitely adds an interesting wrinkle to the series. I don't think, especially someone like Sidney Crosby, he does not want to go out quietly. He knows that the team has gone out in the first round 3 straight years. That it's not going to sit well with someone who is that competitive as a person. And his line was shut down a couple times a little later on in the season. He's definitely probably very upset about that. He's potentially going to take that personally. And then Gino, he's played I think with a chip on his shoulder all year. People have long said that maybe they can win without him, but he had 20 goals and was a point per game in only half a season. Kris Letang just had his best offensive production of his NHL career at age 35. They're full aware of what everyone is saying. And, they want to go out and prove people wrong. And, when players like that speak up in the locker room to players that haven't won before, they can potentially follow in their footsteps and, play some of their best hockey. So it's definitely something that's not to be discounted. I think that's for sure.
So paint me a picture here. How do the Penguins pull off this upset?
It's going to be tough. I mean, obviously they have to get saves. That is, the goaltending has killed them in the last 3 years. Honestly, even going back to the play-in series against Montreal when Matt Murray wasn't that good. Last year, Tristan Jarry, the year before that, I think Matt Murray also wasn't that good against Sounders. Far from the reason they lost. I think their defensive game was really bad in that 2018-19 series. But they have to get the saves. They have to get pucks on net at Shesterkin. I understand the guy has played very well this year, but the Penguins cannot treat this guy like God. You have to get traffic in front of him. You have to throw any puck in the offensive zone at him and make sure that he doesn't see it. You can't be trying to be like the Harlem Globetrotters and make every perfect play to beat this guy. They were doing that a lot in the 4 games this season. It was not working. They scored one 5v5 goal in 4 games. And you know who scored it? Brian Boyle, of all people. The fact that it was Brian Boyle, a 4th-line player who is going to get the start in game 1, for I think Jason Zucker's not going to be available due to an injury. That should tell you a lot of how the Penguins struggled. So they have to do that. They have to also stop the Rangers in transition and off the rush. That's the Rangers' bread and butter. I would not be surprised if the Penguins do play a little more low-event hockey to stay disciplined in the defensive zone. All 3 of those things happen, and potentially they finish their chances, and that regresses to the mean from what we saw maybe a little bit last year. This has the makings of an upset. That said, the Penguins are the underdog, rightfully so, with how they played the last 2-3 weeks. I think a lot is going to have to go right for them to win this series.
All right, Hunter, why don't you let our viewers and our listeners know where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodies. The show's Twitter is at @LO_Penguins. I post daily episodes on the Penguins every day, Monday through Friday, for as long as the Penguins will be in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And you can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hunter, always a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the playoffs.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
This episode is brought to you by your friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts.